Welcome back to Behavioral Echoes, where we explore the cross section of human behavior, positive psychology, NLP, and success to help you navigate life and work more effectively. I'm your co host, Lisa Oborn, and as always, I'm joined by my co host, the insightful Chris Eady. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that affects all of us: conflict resolution, and we'll be using some NLP techniques to unpack this.
Thank you, Lisa. Conflict, whether in the workplace or personal, is something we're all going to encounter. Now, it can be a source of growth or it can be a really, really bad stressor. It depends on how you handle it or your perspective of it. Today, we're going to explore how acknowledging our role and tensions, understanding perceptions and emotions as common sources of conflict, and using some really practical NLP approaches that can help us resolve conflicts constructively. NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, uses language to influence and rearrange mental images by tapping into the way that our minds represents our experiences. We do it with mental images or internal representations or shapes or emotions, and that ends up determining a lot of our behaviors. So the NLP techniques that we're going to be sharing today, it involves using specific language patterns to alter how we visualize these experiences. That's going to change our emotional responses and our actions. Just as an example, if someone visualizes a stressful situation and in their mind, when they really begin to look at that situation, it's a vivid image, NLP as an art might guide them to imagine it as smaller, maybe take some of the color out of it, some of the light, and even move it away so it's not as close, depending on how the person describes that image. Now, by changing that middle image, it can reduce the intensity of the negative emotion that comes along with it. So it makes the situation feel less overwhelming, gives a person a chance to actually deal with it. And by carefully choosing words that guide our minds to adjust the details of those mental images, such as the size, the color, the brightness, or the proximity, NLP helps people shift their perceptions and their reactions to certain events or certain situations.
That's really great by acknowledging how our role in conflict happens. And I like that visual that you gave an example of, Chris, and I can attest to that. A little bit different because if there's something I don't believe or want to pursue, that image on me has an X through it, just sort of saying, no, not going to happen. And maybe we can talk more about why this is so important.
Well, when we're in the mindset of a conflict, really needs to be conflict. It's really easy to conflict. And people talk about defensiveness, but it's really easy to see the other person as the problem. In NLP, what we're trying to get to is the importance of self-awareness, where we get to recognize our own actions, our own words, our nonverbal cues, and how it contributes to whatever that tension is. It doesn't mean that you take the blame. It's about honestly assessing what part we might play in the situation so that we can control that and not be a catalyst towards more conflict.
By acknowledging our role, we empower ourselves to change the dynamics of the conflict. For instance, anybody that's hearing this podcast knows that I have very different tones in my voice. But if I notice that tone tends to become defensive when discussing certain things, I can make a conscious effort to change that. That small shift can significantly alter the complete course of a conversation, prevent an escalation, or a full blown argument.
Interesting, Lisa. That's a really powerful perspective. Let's talk about perception and emotions. These are two key elements that often fuel conflicts. I mean, especially in the workplace and in our personal lives. Indeed, perception is how we interpret the world around us, and it's deeply influenced by our past experience, beliefs, and emotions. These are things that we teach in our seminars. Two people can witness the same event and have completely different interpretations of what happened, and that can lead to misunderstandings and ultimately conflict.
I agree. And emotions, on the other hand, are often the driving force behind how we react to those perceptions. If we're feeling stressed or insecure, we might perceive a harmless comment as a personal attack. Recognizing this connection between perception and emotion is a crucial aspect of resolving conflicts. By being aware of our emotional state and how it influences the perceptions, we can begin to approach conflicts with clarity and objectivity. So, we're going to get into the heart of our episode today with practical NLP based approaches to resolving conflicts. Chris, how can we really apply NLP techniques to resolve these situations?
Great question, Lisa. Neurolinguistic programming offers a variety of techniques that can be incredibly effective in diffusing conflicts. Perhaps I can just drop a couple of them. Remember that NLP is concerned with your neurology, your language, and how you create habits based on your beliefs. So there is a mixture of things that are designed to help people see, feel, and understand things differently, done through language. And it's really about getting at the beliefs that people have that are driven from the subconscious. So this one is what I call reshaping reality. And reshaping reality, you may have heard in other forms of coaching as reframing. Imagine a situation where two team members are arguing about a project deadline. One sees it as an impossible task, while the other is frustrated by what they perceive as a lack of effort. So, by using this reshaping reality, we can help them see the situation differently. For instance, you could say, hey, you know what? We both acknowledge that there's a deadline. And you know what? It's got some issues and we don't like it necessarily, but let's take it on as a challenge because I think if we do this incredibly well, it's going to make us better. It's going to enhance our skills. That actually changes the shift from burden and opens up possibilities for collaboration. Another strategy is pacing the shadow. And if you think about it, you're creating the shadow, but that shadow is actually moving along with you. And that's what you're going to do. And that's what is meant by, in some coaching arenas, matching and mirroring. In another scenario, a manager is having a difficult conversation with an employee, and this employee feels undervalued. By subtly mirroring the employee's body language and matching their tone, the manager can actually allow that person to feel that the manager's empathetic. It allows them to feel heard and understood because the brain notices what's different, but it loves what's the same. And this technique can ease the tension and actually pave the way for a more productive dialogue. Lisa, you can chime in. I know I'm on a roll here with these examples, but chime in when you want to.
I love these examples. I think they're really great. And I'm sitting here at this time going through experiences that have happened in each of those examples. In my head, of sort of seeing how I reacted or how others reacted. So I really appreciate this.
Super. And a lot of these, we've talked about uh, leadership, and I've done a podcast or just a post on what that really means from the perspective of how we influence or are influenced. And these particular skills are really, really, in my opinion, critical when we're talking about conflict because that's where we really want to have the greatest influence. It's great when we can lead when things are going great, but how do we show up? When we really think about using these techniques are not only discussed in all of the things that we talk about, but these are really powerful because you want to show up as a great leader. You want to show up as a great team member. You want to show up as a great spouse. You want to show up as a great, reliable friend when there's conflict. Because when you can demonstrate that you can make it through conflict, you become a more reliable asset in terms of relationships for people. So let's talk about mind markers, also known as anchors. Consider a conflict between spouses where one partner feels neglected. When we use this mind marker technique, we can help them access positive emotional states. For example, associating a touch or a word with a time when they felt deeply connected or felt really valued can reintroduce that positive feeling into their interactions. And what it does is it helps to dissolve the current tension.
First,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think at this point, what I want to have the listeners really understand and consider is in many cases, we have been taught that conflict is not good. That's not true. Conflict is a wonderful thing if you know how to use it and how to grow from it. It can really be positive in how you change and assess different situations. And these techniques really help you to see how do we do that? How do we address it? Conflict doesn't have to result. in a fight or an argument. A conflict really helps us to learn and approach things from a way we may have never considered before.
Interestingly, I think it's really about monitoring, Lisa, not only what situations we're in, what the conflict really is about. Oftentimes, it's a matter of, to the point that you made earlier, in asking the question, what am I contributing to this? What do I own in this? Sometimes it's a matter of asking, is me being defensive going to add more value to this? Because that question alone oftentimes will cause us or prompt us not to actually add more fuel to the fire, if that makes sense.
It does completely. And I think that's really important for our listeners to understand. It's again goes back to how we react to situations. It is so important.
So here's another example. I call this one out of this world and back. And it's a meta model questioning process. And all that that means is you remove the person from where they are in their thinking and sort of bring them back. And when they come back, and again, remember, this is influenced by language patterns. When you bring them back, they are in a different place, perhaps. So in the workplace, if a colleague accuses you of always dismissing their ideas, you can use this out of the world and back technique and ask, can you tell me when specifically you felt your ideas were dismissed? Now they have to leave the emotional state. They have to actually go somewhere logic, and this is where I often say logic over limbic or emotional part of the brain. They have to go away from that emotional state and then actually give you data points for the specific question that you've asked. And what it does is it helps to clarify issues. It can prevent the conversation from becoming too broad, and it can even prevent it from becoming accusatory. It allows you to address specific concerns. The last one I'll share is I call it the circuit breaker. And let's consider a situation where someone consistently reacts angrily to criticism. You're just so negative. You're always saying that I can't do a good enough job, or you're just always on my back about everything. The circuit breaker can be used to replace this automatic reaction with a more constructive one. And it could be that that might be you. This is done by visualizing the anger being replaced with a calm response whenever the criticism arises. So, for instance, if I felt myself or know that a certain trigger happens in a certain situation and I've got to go into that situation, then what I can do is, like Lisa talked about, take that 5 minutes and go ahead and associate that trigger to a different image. So in the past, it might have been that when Ron said X, I always felt Y. And maybe what I do is I say, you know what? When Ron says X this time, I'm going to think about fishing on Lake Erie. I'm going to think about taking a cruise across the ocean. I'm going to think about being in the Bahamas. And the more you make the association in your mind, the more you repeat that, you build a neural pathway, and that trigger goes to that image, and you'll end up having a different response.
And I think this is really great information. And it really gives people the opportunity to look at themselves and how they react to conflict. And that's really important. And taking responsibility, which is also extremely important in these situations, because in many cases, and I know when you work with people, when I work with people, and we have those discussions, so many see themselves as being on the outside and they're not contributing, but don't look at that full spectrum. And these tips are really great. And it's really, you probably have many stories throughout all the years of that can tie this together. And stories help people to reprogram their own thinking. And in a lot of cases, that's why storytelling is so important and the willingness to share and to become vulnerable. And it's important. If you can go ahead and relax, maybe Chris, you can take us through something.
So this is an NLP-based metaphor that speaks directly to your unconscious mind. Imagine you're in a serene garden, surrounded by vibrant flowers and the gentle sound of a flowing stream. Each step you take on the soft grass brings you closer to a beautiful ancient tree standing tall in the center of the garden. As you approach, you notice a small golden key hanging from one of its branches. This key represents the wisdom and tools you've been gathering, both consciously and unconsciously throughout our time together. You take the key, and you feel its warmth in your hand. With each breath, you realize that this key has the power to unlock new doors in your life. Doors that lead to harmonious relationships, inner peace, and the ability to resolve conflicts with grace and ease. And as you hold this key, you feel a deep sense of gratitude for the journey you've been on. You know that whenever you need it, this key will be there to guide you, helping you to unlock the best version of yourself. As you gently place the key in your pocket, you smile, knowing it represents an email or a call that gets you the rapid support and/or change you want to be able to face any challenges ahead with confidence, clarity, and calm. And as you continue to listen to the episodes of Behavioral Echoes, because the more you will know, this key will continue to open new doors, revealing even more insights and tools to enhance your life and work. The journey is just beginning, and there's so much more to discover together. And as you allow yourself to awaken from that moment of refreshing thoughts that allowed you to understand what you've learned here today, understand that you walk away with the key.
And thank you, Chris, for that story. It is really a perfect way to close this episode. We hope you, our listeners, have found today's discussion insightful and you've learned many different ways to approach conflict. I hope it helps you and puts things in new perspective.
Remember, every conflict is an opportunity for growth. And with the right tools and the right people supporting you, you will be able to navigate it successfully. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep exploring the echoes of your behavior. Bye.
Bye.